Let's start with the obvious one, President Trump. By now, everyone with an internet connection knows that long before President Trump ran for office, The Simpsons called it. The episode in question, Bart to the Future, aired back in 2000, which is 20 years ago, and makes me feel very old. It shows Bart and Lisa in the future, with Bart being a slacker while Lisa is president of the US. While Lisa is the first female US president in the episode, they do make a reference to her predecessor.
As you know, we've inherited quite a budget crunch from President Trump.
President Trump may have been elected back in 2016, with 2020 potentially being his last year in office, but it is definitely a line that is extremely relevant in 2020. When asked about the line, writer and consulting producer Dan Greeny couldn't remember who initially pitched it or how it arose, but said how the show embraced American culture and how Trump was a part of that. But we all secretly know they have a time machine or a TARDIS or something in the writing room, but they just refuse to tell us. The show also makes reference to Ivanka Trump running for office, but that isn't till 2028. Of course, we couldn't talk about 2020 without mentioning the pandemic that has ripped across the world, COVID-19. You might have heard about it. COVID-19 continues to wreak havoc on our society and change the way we operate for the foreseeable future. And if you asked anyone last year how they foresaw this year turning out, a lot of people wouldn't have suggested a global pandemic. I was personally looking forward to Disney World, but of course the writers at Simpsons aren't the same as us mere mortals, with them predicting a global pandemic. In the season 4 episode Marge in Chains, the show predicts a global flu spreading across the world called Osaka flu, and it is spread by a Japanese factory worker coughing into a package. The two don't share the same name, or even the same type of virus, and the Osaka flu originated from Japan as opposed to the province of Wuhan, but there are some scary parallels between the two. As Springfield begins to panic, they desperately seek a cure, but in doing so, accidentally set off a chain of events which are also strangely similar to 2020. As the residents of Springfield panic and go into a frenzy, they push over a truck, only to release a horde of killer bees. As you may know, earlier in the year, the Asian giant hornet, otherwise known as the much more sinister name murder hornets, were spotted on the western coast of the United States, triggering a great deal of alarm. Not only does the sighting of murder hornets in the US pose a threat to local wildlife, but let's face it, a creature that is known as a murder hornet is somewhat concerning. The threat seems to have been somewhat contained for now, but with the way 2020 is going, I am definitely sleeping with one eye open. The Simpsons may not have called them murder hornets, but to have killer bees in the same episode as a global pandemic is an ominous coincidence.
I'm cured! Ouch!
In terms of 2020 predictions, the Marge in Chains episode is the gift that keeps on giving. As the title refers, Marge is arrested in the episode for accidentally stealing a bottle of bourbon and spends 30 days in prison. Marge's arrest leads to mass riots across Springfield. While the events are very, very different and the beats in the episode are purely satirical, the mass riots due to a controversial arrest have striking parallels to the Justice riots taking place across not only the US, but the world. If the episode had just featured this arrest, then it may not have been enough to compare it to the riots of 2020. But with the inclusion of a global pandemic and killer bees, the coincidences are just too much to not include. A controversial statue in the episode of Marge in Chains is what leads to the riots, with Springfield Park Commission failing to raise enough money for an Abraham Lincoln statue, and instead going for a statue of Jimmy Carter.
Beats history's greatest monster!
In fact, the episode ends with Springfield unveiling a Marge statue.
It's beautiful.
Which is the best statue you could make, but it actually turns out to be the Carter statue with Marge's hair. So pretty close, I guess. But there's another episode that refers to a controversial statue. In the episode The Telltale Head, Bart cuts off the head of the statue commemorating the town's founder, Jebediah Springfield, in an effort to be popular. Bart eventually returns the head and it is reattached to the statue. But for avid Simpsons watchers, you know the character of Jebediah is a controversial one. Lisa uncovers the truth that Jebediah is actually a literal silver-tongued pirate called Hans Sprungfield, who brawled with George Washington before assuming the name Jebediah Springfield, making him an imposter and false icon. However, Lisa decided to keep Springfield's identity as a secret as she noticed the good he brought out of the local residents. And while Bart didn't take down the head of the statue due to political agenda, like the episode Marge in Chains, the taking down of controversial statues is eerily similar to what's happening today.